G'day and welcome to another episode of SPC's Unleashed. Almost in the process of renaming it. We kind of agreed last week that it was going to become Agents Unleashed. But, Agents Unleashed, Change Unleashed, we had a few, but it looks like it's going to be Agents Unleashed. So coming soon. But we've got to go and do all the admin that sits behind the decision. And in the meantime, the boys were very excited to talk about ethics. And I don't know whether Niko was just predicting the conversations he was going to have with his kids this week, or whether it was a bit of chicken and egg. But over to you, Niko. Take us away.
Thank you. Agents Unleashed. Yeah. Talking about ethics. Great. I prepared something, and I thought it wouldn't be cool if some AI persona would read this. And then I ran out of time. So I'm now AI, and I'm reading what I've prepared, if it's okay with you, with a sexy voice. It was the idea. So let me prepare my sexy voice. So, and in this show, 3 voices, 1 question, AI and ethics. Stephan speaks of responsibility that should never hide in a black box. Mark wants awareness without reflection. Just another algorithm running blind. And finally, Niko, that's me, reminds us ethics is not compliance, it's a socio-political responsibility. One stretches far beyond the code itself. The riddle remains. Is accountability a burden we carry, or the compass that carries us forward? This summary was provided by AI, so I just feed in all the things I thought you will say or I've seen in the preparation, and it was a summary, and I asked to prepare something. Yeah, still not catchy. I think I tried myself again. No.
You needed some background music.
Oh,
for sure.
Let me call the kids. No.
Background singers.
Exactly. Okay. So we really agreed on AI and ethics, and I think it's a broad topic. And the first thing I would like to know for you, and not what is your passion or what scares you or whatever, but I would like to know what comes first in your mind when you hear AI and ethics.
So when I read that, I went, without any control whatsoever, my mind went straight back to like 6 or 7 years ago. And it was actually a moment where my son had decided that he was not a math science kid, he was a humanities kid. And he was starting to think about what possible futures might look like. And we wound up in this 1 hour long discussion about ethics and AI and driverless cars. And he at the time, right, and he's early teens at this point, and life was very black and white to him. And I was taking him down this, very long discussion to go, well, let's imagine how there could be ethical dilemmas for a driverless car. And he's like, well, surely not. Surely it's just going to make better decisions than humans. And I said, well, what if it is choosing between 2 accidents and the accidents involve different types of people? And he went, well, you pick the ones that have got the least remaining lifespan. So we had this huge tunnel we dug down to go, how do you get to a point where the AI is making a good decision about life and death choices controlling a car? And of course, just then there were starting to be people actually doing PhDs and schools of study emerging around, the whole notion of the psychology of AI and ethics. But I think the thing that struck me when I finished reminiscing on that hour of torturing my son in the car was back then when I thought about AI and ethics, it was big grand choices like, who does the car choose to hurt in a crisis? As opposed to actually today, for most of us, there are ethical AI decisions happening every few minutes in our lives. It's moved from a kind of almost science fiction-y imagination thing into a day-to-day reality for us. And it's like that's kind of snuck up.
Yeah, I had something similar in my mind when I had to answer this question myself. Was exactly the question, not can AI be responsible, but who is responsible? So if AI chooses that, somebody trained that, is the responsibility of the ones who train the AI? Or, who is responsible for that? So if he chooses the one who was older, maybe he was 1 day away from a breakthrough curing diseases, and the other one was just a mean kid that will never do anything in society, if we can judge it. I don't know. Maybe this kid will change in 10 years. So I really thought, if you drive yourself, you do this decision instantly, and you have to live with the choice. If somebody else is doing this decision, or if AI is doing the decision, who is really responsible? So the first thing that came in my mind now was not if a car has to decide, but when he decides or it decides, who is responsible and what is wrong. So deciding wrong is also a nice said, but what is really wrong? Killing the old, killing the young. What is old? So you see, I hadn't really an answer. So I already start talking with my family since I prepared this episode, the questions on Saturday after this show, and we had the whole week discussions at home about ethics, about the future, and was really cool discussions. Stephan, what comes first in your mind when you hear AI and ethics?
Yeah, I kind of have mixed feelings when I read your question or your trigger. As an information systems engineer, I'm aware that systems need data, and my mixed feelings are about privacy of data. Someone will collect data. It has to be stored somewhere. The way it's stored, and then the way it is used. So this popped up when you came up with this trigger. And looking back a few of our past episodes, we were dealing with data. We need that data. And yeah, that's my 2 cents to this trigger.
Wow, data. Talking about data, do we really have the choice what we share? So can we say just no, and then what happens?
Very good question.
Why don't you keep the ball rolling, Stephan, since you opened it? Because I think I'm going to be a little bit more flippant, and you're probably going to be more systematic.
Yeah, you know, I'm actually in Scotland for a short holiday trip, and we just experienced Storm Amy. And you can be structured as much as you're looking over regarding our flights. It's
Oh, you are having
taking over
Wi-Fi
regarding
issues.
how much debris you have in front of the house on your lawn, all the dead branches from the trees, right? So
Looks like you're coming and going with Wi-Fi, by the way, Stephan. You kind of were there and here. But I'll jump in.
okay.
I think your wife should stop watching Netflix and Disney Plus and give you the one bandwidth back. No, just kidding. We just missed the last sentence of yours. Will you try it again?
Yeah, what I said is, can you control everything? No. Storm Amy has taken over in Scotland, and this morning is kind of under restructuring how we behave, what we do, and how it affects our lives.
Yeah, but it's not the same. So until now, I was in charge of my data, my decisions. So Storm is not really something I decide, and then I realize, oh, I have no choice. It's something that just happens. What's about data? I have so there comes a window and says log in with your that account, and with that you give your soul and your privacy away. You can say yes or no. Will it be okay to say no, and what happens if no? So what happens with that decision?
Yeah, let me be picky on that one. Are we really in control, or are we just thinking we are in control? I think we have the same basic questions to answer with AI as well, but it's speeding up. You get more opportunities to deal with data. The question about is it proper data, is it clean data we are using, stuff like that is adding to the overall challenges we still have. I don't think, if I look back my last 35 years in the trade, yeah, we thought we could decide, we could master everything. But yeah, it opens up a new whole field for me.
I think for me, a lot of people think they're in control today, but they don't necessarily have the mindfulness. Like, what control do I have? What kind of data am I sharing? Do I really have awareness? And it's one of those things where I'm going to do two kind of generational looks. There's a generational look for me, which is I've got a 20-year-old son who grew up in the digital age. And if I look at the way he treats data about himself, he is so much more mindful about his personal data than I am. He's mindful. Somebody takes a photo with him in it. he's mindful of his ability to control people's access, right? He turned around to me a little while ago and said, Dad, nobody shares phone numbers with each other anymore, right? You share Instas because you can block somebody from your Insta, right? And you get control. So these kids of today, they grow up with layered views of their personal data and how they're exposing it to the world. It's just built into them, almost just a part of being society. But us older people didn't grow up like that. You know, of course I share my phone number. And you know, do I have different emails that I use for different purposes? Well, I've often wished that I did, but I don't. But any kid of today is going to have that. And I think that same level of am I aware has to start to creep into questions I'm running with AI, right? Do I know whether I have decisions about whether or not to share information with ChatGPT or with Claude? Do I know the repercussions of different choices I make? You know, am I even checking? There was recently a big furor because Claude put out an update that switched the toggle from automatically not sharing to automatically sharing. And there was such a controversy blew up about it that a day later they reversed the decision. And we've got this world where people are becoming more and more conscious of the commercial value of data, right? We've been talking about it for years. And companies like Google and Amazon and Facebook have built multi-billion, potentially multi-trillion-dollar empires on the basis of the commercial value of data. Most of us don't. Right? But you look around and what you're seeing at the moment, and all of the companies, let's say LinkedIn works very hard to make sure the only way you get at LinkedIn data is logged in, manually interacting. Instagram, it's pretty easy to get at their data, but they're busy locking it down, so it's harder to get at their data. People are getting a lot more focused about putting messages on their websites, right? There's a file, I think it's called llms.txt, which actually communicates what you are and aren't willing to share from your website to LLMs. Is everybody using that, right? Do you have the awareness to know what you're sharing? Because if you don't know what you're sharing, you've never got any choices going on because you're not making choices. You're just letting it fly by.
But that leads to a situation of take it or leave it, right? And you're deciding in that context with your data, because your data is like has a price tag as well.
Mm-hmm.
Am I sharing it? Am I blocking it? And if I block too much, I'm probably out of the inner circle. I'm not within the fence. I can't use it. So that makes me think. And for me, the producers, the creators, have a huge responsibility regarding the usage of data, collection of data, bringing it into the systems. And where do you position this take it or leave it, right? Is it a binary thing, or is it kind of an area where you really are in control, where you start deciding, am I in, and to what kind of range am I in a system or even in an ecosystem?
Yeah, the more I think, the less I think I have it under control. So let's go into WhatsApp. When you have WhatsApp and somebody has your number, you're already part of the system, even if you never agreed. And they are saying, if you are part of WhatsApp, you took care that everybody on your phone book agreed that they are on the phone book. So what the hell question is that? So I'm sure it's not really legal to say you're responsible that everybody in your phone book agrees that your phone book now is public. Yeah, I think Stephan, you're right. You convinced somehow we are not really under control of the data. And Mark, I think it's also the way you or we handle data, because I see also kids. Let's go to my youngest daughter. They have no idea about the stuff. So the older ones, I think they're much more careful. I remember last time when my middle kid watched me how I just accept all cookies without reading it, and she was really so. How can you? I thought, oh, that's just a dummy browser which just does everything, and then I close it, and then I'm a completely fresh new person. Just okay, because she really tries to handle what she wants to give away or not. But Stephan, you're right. If you're anyway part of it, and the other question is how much you want to interact with that. So for instance, our youngest doesn't want to be part of WhatsApp. she's missing a lot of class gossip, which, by the way, I think it's good that she misses. But that's another point. She maybe misses also important stuff.
So WhatsApp's a great example to me of a generational divide thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all know about the fact that basically by continuing to use it, we're giving Facebook a stupid amount of our data, right?
Mm-hmm.
What my children know is that their parents are old and they want to use WhatsApp. Therefore, because they don't view family interaction as particularly data sensitive, they're willing to use it for family interaction. But they would never use WhatsApp right. They literally, and I watch them talk about these things and make these calls. They literally go, what are the privacy concerns I've got with different ways of communicating, and which way am I going to communicate based on the privacy and I care about my ownership of that data? It is fascinating watching their awareness.
Do you guys read the whole stuff? So before you sign up for something?
I had a friend who did a PhD on whether people read those.
You do a meta reading, okay, Stephan?
No, obviously not. But I the past few years, maybe once or twice, I really took the time to read it. And first of all, do I really understand everything? No, you should be a legal person to understand every part of such a text. In the end, and I must confess, I don't care, because I want to take part in that service. I want to have this action, so I have to agree. It's again this take it or leave it, right? And within seconds or pretty fast, you have to make a decision. Am I in? Am I out?
But I think like there's a little bit deeper there for us, right? So if you talk about what you just said there, Stephan, was I'm going to make a mindful choice.
Yeah.
Right? I know what I'm giving up and I'm willing to pay it. But if you think about being in a world where you are trying to be an AI change agent, you're trying to help a company think about their AI strategy, right? What data they're potentially giving away? When they use ChatGPT to help them write an email, what personally identifiable information are they potentially sharing with the world in doing that? Right? And do you have an awareness of the potential exposure of the types of information that we tend to share in an AI setting? If you don't have that, then you're not going to help your client think about making mindful choices. So I think there's a real duty of care to us if we're coaching clients in the AI space to be actually highly aware of some of the implications around data and the various ways that data can get out of your world from an ethical perspective.
Yeah, agreed, Mark. As a consultant, I get all of a sudden different NDAs to sign, right? Extended ones, or now companies really being aware, as you mentioned, they're giving away more than they think, right? Yeah. Talking to a customer about strategy, talking to a customer about a lean portfolio management, it opens up a whole new range of possibilities, but also access to data, which then, with the help of AI, gets a whole new sphere of options and possibilities in my trade.
But that's what makes it really fascinating to me, right? Is every potential internal application of AI is going to be fueled by data, right?
Right.
So you want more and more data available to AI because it opens up more and more possibilities to you, but at the same time, it opens up more and more risk surface. And I think, the world is caught between companies that are just blindly taking an awful lot of risks and companies that are so concerned about the risk they're not using AI at all. And I think there's going to be a really interesting time for us in the next couple of years as we try and find the space to hold between those two.
I would like to add on that the leaders think the people don't use AI because they just restricted everything.
Yeah.
But the other thing is we have AI on our pocket, on our mobile phone. So they use just different ways, which is much more dangerous because now I use it as a private person. And we just heard how Stephan acts as a private person, different as a consultant. So so now we're doing it on our mobile phones, taking pictures of our screens and feeding to a free AI, which has no limitations at all. So instead of having a proper governance, we took the decision. It's nothing for us, but people still using it. So, and that's one of the huge problems, or one of the we talked about blind spots. I think 2 episodes ago, It's something people don't, or manager don't realize. If you just banish AI, it's still there, just on the illegal way or in the private way. Yeah. So in my case, what I'm doing with the whole privacy part, when I was younger, I read everything, and I remember days when it was on paper, and I just take a pen and remove parts I didn't like before I sign a contract, which in Switzerland is completely legal. If the other person says nothing, that's the new contract. That's the new part of the contract, and it changed because now too much reading. It's too many tools, too many things, and what I'm doing now is really asking AI to summarize what they want from me, and ask also how is it compared to something else? Do you see things I shouldn't sign? At least I'm aware of. But I'm with Stephan. I have no choice. I have to be in or out, and at least I try to find out what it means when I'm in.
And then just to top it off, what you're doing at that moment is you're giving AI data about your internal contractual arrangements with your clients that may well be confidential.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it sounds like the start of a vicious circle, right? So, yeah.
I didn't say it was NDAs, but you're right. Yeah, if you extend it on this way, you realize, okay, you give it a lot of information. Yes, yes.
Sure.
But even if you just send it per email, you give the information also to the whole world, because it's just a postcard from one person to the other. But wow, let's go to another different topic, but on a section about future generations. We talked about kids, about they are different, they handle data, how aware they are. I personally think they are aware because parents were aware too, because I'm also sure some parents don't care, and the kids will also not care. So, by the way, if I imagine how many parents just post pictures of naked babies and naked young kids, I'm not sure if these kids are more aware, or later if they have a if it comes back again when they are older. But this brought me to the question about future generations. What moral obligations do we have when we're deploying AI today? What can we destroy? What can we? What come on, English obligations.
Obligations.
Who wants to start?
I drew a blank, so it's over to you guys. So first time ever I sat and thought for 5 minutes. I went, I really don't know what I'm going to answer to this. So
You're too old for that shit, or what? No.
I liked your question, Niko, and I scribbled down a few things. And then you mentioned your family, and thinking about my family, my kids, my grandkids. And when I summarized my sketches and my notes, again, using AI, it came up with the term of stewardship, right? I'm not telling my kids how to live their life, but what is my stewardship towards the family, towards my kids, the next few generations? And I'm not using the word obligations, although I feel like that. I do have my obligations for the future, although I'll disappear one day, and that's it. And I think it's about, we already talked about that. How do you control environments? How do you control certain things, right? And some are control freaks, some don't even care. There's the whole range. And behind this whole range for me is I want to prevent harm for my family, for other people, for my friends. So this is one of the obligations I probably have as a producer, as a creator of AI stuff. The other one is every culture has values, and we as human beings, what I cherish is dignity, right? To live a life in dignity. And if you look at this world, first world, second world, third world, there's not the same dignity for everyone. And now a new technology comes in, new stuff comes in, which probably shakes up those values and how we keep dignity. And with that comes what I like. If I look back in my life, it's what is a fair share? A fair share. I know something. How do I share my knowledge? I do have something. How do I share with my friends? Am I a good host at home? Is there an open door policy? Do we have guests over for a coffee or for an event, or is it no? This is my castle. Everyone else is out. And the funny thing, AI came back with an idea calling it a user manual for the future. So when it comes to the stewardship, are we not only leaving traces and systems, are we using it with a manual so people understand why we built stuff the way we built it? How should it be used? And because that's for me what the user manual is, right?
Mhm.
My brother reads user manuals. I don't. I just fiddle around with the new stuff. And then I probably hit the wall and I have to go back to the user manual. While my brother reading the user manual is much cleverer than I am, and he gets faster in no time understanding what the system is, how it works, and how it should be used. And this leading back to the stewardship we have as people.
My thoughts is going now in a direction. If it becomes too political, please stop me and we do something else, because I still want to visit some countries in the next years. What really touched me, and I agree with that, is the idea of fair share. And we have now a technology that takes away maybe jobs, but can make us much more wealthier. And now we can share. But when I look what happens in the world, in politics, I'm just wondering, will it be a nice share, or will it just be the richers? So what I'm with you is, I really want to avoid some irreversible damage, but I don't know if those people who are in charge really think that way, or they're just playing now whatever they have to play the role that they survive. And that's what makes me a little bit sad. But I think now we are going, we derail somewhere in a discussion which it's not part of Agent Unleashed, which is just a criticism on society or criticism of the riches. I don't know. Mark, help me.
I was just about to follow you on the sidetrack because so my son is very much an environmental activist, and he is working on making me more environmentally aware every week. So we have a lot of discussions about, the challenge of environmentalism is that some countries may be doing something about it while a lot of the world is not. And how do you deal with that? Because it's the same kind of thing, right? If you're ethical environmentally, but your neighbours aren't, and we've got a great example with Australia. We've been trying to be more ethical about managing our fish stocks. And putting a lot of licensing controls over it to allow fish stocks to replenish. But we have neighbouring countries who are poor and they come and they fish in our waters because they are not living the same things. And I think you get that same question with ethics. Right.
Right.
Becomes really quite fascinating. But I reckon we should have a crack at Harm's answer before we get distracted by jiggles. So Harm came in and said, what about a scenario with using AI to enforce ethics? And actually, the thing that came straight to mind was I was watching a video, a couple of days ago. Somebody was going through, of course, they leaked the new Claude 4.5 system prompt, and somebody was going through doing a bit of a dissection about interesting things they found in the system prompt. And one of the things they found was an awful lot of anti-plagiarism prompting. So there are a whole bunch of sections in the new 4.5 system prompt to actually stop it from doing direct cited quotes that might breach copyright. And you can see they're starting to try and get to, well, people are using it and it's doing a whole bunch of copyright breaches. The suspicion, of course, is they're protecting themselves from lawsuits. People are actually starting to get into, how do I prompt, whether it's in a system prompt or whether it's in an agent definition, how do I prompt for ethical behavior? And or how do I prompt to detect unethical behavior? So people are starting to do it. I think the really interesting question becomes, how do you codify your ethics in a way that a prompt is capable of interpreting?
Yes. Let me pick up this one, Mark. Going back to Stephan Beer's viable system model, there's this system number 5, which is the normative system, ring fencing the other systems in a viable system. And I'm a high advocate on this question that comes from harm. It's about a scenario that allows the company to, from onboarding people during their work until they leave a company, to accompany them in a very supportive way, right? Even saying no to certain actions, as you mentioned. Am I allowed to use such a prompt? And before the prompt gives back a result, you probably get back a message. This is not how we think as a company. And what you just mentioned, Mark, for me is, I would say, and I'm being very blunt about this one, 99% of all companies don't have ethics. They can't express it. How can you bring it into a scenario and bring it into the AI world if you don't know what you are talking about, if you don't know how to describe it, and to even script or code it in a system? But the scenario, yes, we have to deal with that one. And it's, again, going back to leadership, this is one of the big obligations you have as a C-level to make it happen in your organization.
I'm now sad and mad and happy at the same time, because I just realized it's something we have to do as companies, as individuals. I just looked the whole time for an answer. How can the whole society enforce this? And that's much more difficult, because I still think some companies, some crazy people will not do that. So, but yeah, being there as a company, as a person, as a human, and saying this is our ethic, and I want to enforce this in our AI. That makes absolutely sense. I haven't seen a solution how we can enforce it worldwide. So one discussion we had with the family was, what happens to Musk's AI, which was somehow half a Nazi, half whatever. So where was there the ethics, or is it normal what it's doing? So I think some companies will have, as you said, have ethics and should and will enforce it, and others will just take whatever they have. I also thought about it. What's with open source and AI? If an AI is open source, I can remove all the control parts. So that was where I'm going with the question. So I'm really happy you answered in a different way. That was the happy part, and the sad part was what I just said. Sorry if I make the day everybody said. It wasn't the, the intention.
That's not your job, Niko.
Clever guy.
Thank you so much. Let's mess up with our brains. So let's go to Jiggle Land, where each time I have the chance to give you to activate other parts of the brain. And this time it's a hard one. Well, also hard for me. If AI and ethics were an exhibit in a museum, again, if AI and ethics was an exhibit in a museum, what does it look like? And which museum exhibits it?
So I'm going to go first. And when I first looked at this one, I went, I've got absolutely no idea. I left it alone. And then I picked it up again, and it was like I got an instant answer. So here's my instant answer. It's a very lightly reflavored Mongols visit. So if you think about the story of the Mongols in a museum, they came, they saw, they conquered, they became the thing that they conquered. And the question that I leave with you is, in this scenario, are the humans the Mongols or the Chinese?
That's a good one.
Ooh, yeah. But by the way, before I hand over to Stephan, each time we use Mark's custom ChatGPT to generate an image, and this time I really loved the image because it showed exactly what we are seeing. So who is which? So who is the origin? Who is the master? Who is giving whom the torch? What the heck is the kid doing? So I think unfortunately it just disappears from LinkedIn as soon as we did the show. So I think maybe we should have like a gallery walk around all the images. This time I really liked what the co-creation with the AI was, and at the end I think this time AI was the master of the ideas, and I just tweaked around. So I really like this picture, and this one just symbolizes your story, Mark, at the end. I like this very much. Stephan.
Yeah, well, you said where would you see it in a museum? And if you go to museums, you look at things, and the idea behind my jiggle was, what if you look at something and it looks back, and you recognize, oh, it's a mirror, it's an algorithmic mirror, because it's about math, it's about statistics, it's about data, and how we deal with that. So reflecting our digital selves. And where would I go to? The Deutsches Museum in Munich, which probably has written Marx exhibit. And they show the past, but they also show what could the future look like. So they really span ages. And according to your interest, you go and you have a look. And so the algorithmic mirror, it's our biases. We already talked about that, our blind spots, our hopes, our flaws, but also our values, because we said it's about ethics. And if I could create such an exhibit, it should be highly interactive.
Yeah.
No matter who is in front of the mirror, it acts differently, right?
Oh, that's a cool
And
one.
instead of
One
a
with-
signature of, and instead of the signature of an artist, there would be a quote that says, "The future is not yet written. You are the architect." How do you deal with it?
Sounds like Matrix. No.
Kind of.
So I was somehow just thinking and then started writing while I was thinking. So I thought it has to be something transparent, because we talk about ethics, it should be transparent. And then I realized transparent has different meanings in German and in English. So if in English something is transparent, you can look through it like a glass. And that's the picture I had first in my mind. And then I realized in German, it's something you look how it works. So you see all the gears and everything there because it's transparent. You can see how the machine is working. It's not a black box. It's you see everything, and that's transparent. And in English is something I don't care. I just look through. And then I realized I would like to see the gears somehow, but still, it's now some gears in a glass. That's now the art, the exhibit I'm having there, and they're working there. Two little gears just working in a huge glass, and the museum is everywhere. They're just drones carrying this glass around our heads and flies around, and hopefully it has enough ethics not to let it fall down on my head. That was what I came with. So was a cool journey in my head, at least.
Sounds good.
It's got to continue. Let's go to the story, Mark, you started with. The story about the car and deciding who to kill or who to hurt more. If you have to do an accident, you cannot brake on time. I would like to know over what you think AI should be allowed to decide. And if so, who's accountable? Mark, what do you think?
So, look, it's all for me about the risk and the consequence of the wrong decision in any decision. But then I think if I put an ethics overlay on it, because that's the default answer. If you are using AI in some fashion for automation of a capability or automation of a decision or a workflow or anything else, you got to look at, well, how much human control do I need? Is a combination of the sophistication of my ability to implement the AI and the risk level of something being made as a wrong decision. Ethics just happens to be a branch. And I think that's where it gets really interesting because, again, it goes back to that awareness. And if you look a little bit more seriously at the way people are approaching engineering with AI these days, you'll hear a term that, the hardware guys love, and occasionally you hear it in software, which is failure modes. And I still remember back when I was an architect, I would occasionally have to write a failure modes effects analysis. How might this thing fail? What would be the impact? How might I mitigate for it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And everybody looking at engineering AI solutions stresses failure modes analysis through a, behavioral evaluation perspective. And the challenge to you is think of the different ways it might fail. It might fail because it gets the wrong answer. It might fail because it uses too many tokens. It might fail because it takes too long. Goodness knows. But I think the question is you got to ask yourself is, when I'm applying AI in a situation, how might it fail ethically? And what am I going to do to defend against that potential ethical failure? Right? Now, is it potentially that it's going to have bias? Right? Let's say I'm an HR team and I'm using it as part of screening resumes when I advertise job listings. Right? Really logical productivity application of it. Well, what's the chance that it's going to have bias about how it picks job listings? It doesn't mean you can't use it to screen resumes, but it does mean that when you think about using it to screen resumes, you've got to consider the way in which bias or unethical decisions might enter that decisioning process and be explicit how you're going to actually validate that it hasn't done so. And that's where I think the combo for me is about going, on the one hand, what's the risk associated with a wrong decision, and recognizing that ethical risk is very much a part of that potential risk. But the other is, what is my current ability to safeguard against that risk? Right? What sophistication do I have in the way that I currently employ and deploy AI to enable me to effectively manage it? Right? And if my sophistication is low and my risk is high, I probably shouldn't be doing it at all. But if my sophistication grows, then realistically my risk becomes more effectively controlled. So, who's accountable? Well, at the end of the day, the company's accountable. They're taking a stance, and it's a risk posture. But it's not black and white. It's about awareness, asking yourself questions, and evaluating the trade-offs. And every discussion I have with anybody in business about responsible AI, full stop, right, is you are choosing a risk posture. Make sure you're making an informed choice.
Yeah.
And this, Mark, would be related for me to what are the stakes, right?
Yeah.
Is it, do I have low stakes? I would say, okay, AI, go for it, help me, right? You have high autonomy, my stakes are low, so I probably have low risks in it. The question is, when it comes to a medium stake, like we talked about pilots and co-pilots the last episode, right? You're a pilot in a plane. Your plane is full of AI helping you. There's an automatic navigation system. There's GPS, whatever. There is kind of a core working space where, based on my stakes, I have to decide where do I interact, where do I set my stakes, and say, now I decide. And the other one where I have a high stake, let's think about I'm in a hospital in palliative care. I don't want the machine to decide if I live or not. It's still what I've written down on a sheet of paper as a patient, that someone for me will decide if I'm out of mind, if I'm not able to do that. So for me, it's about stakes. And as you said, Mark, yeah, in the end, those who create those systems and are using AI, they have the primary responsibility. Also for the future, as you mentioned, Niko, for the future generations. And again, this leads me back to, as you said, Mark, fitness for use, right? You have an architecture that is fit for use. And on top comes regulatory aspects, government aspects that have to be baked in as well, which is part of ethics, where there are certain values behind it. Regulator tries to protect the majority of the people against harm, and how you deal with certain risks. So yeah, there's a huge range of stakes, and based on the context again, based on the stakes, I would answer the question: who's responsible, who's dealing with it, and how you deal with it.
Let's make it practical. I like the discussion. We call the episode Unleashed. Agents Unleashed, Change Unleashed, whatever, but Unleashed. What should we unleash to make this practical? Or let's ask differently, what cultural shifts do we need to be prepared for this accountability, for ethics, to be part of our daily lives? So what can we do? What can our spectators do? Our listeners do?
Yeah, let me
Sorry, I
try
just
and
destroyed the
start.
Miro board. So
Okay,
now
let's
I'm back.
Stephan
I just
go first.
destroyed the whole flow.
Niko as a moderator is fully unleashed, and we're following. Okay, so let me throw in two things that are still the same. It shouldn't change the culture that we have, and if we say culture is the sum of our behavior, we still should build carefully. And if things are broken, you have to fix it. That's how I was brought up, right? You fix it if you break it, or you clean up. Second one, we talked about it, is data is still a liability, right? You leave traces, you give your data. And now what changes drastically, and I as an old dog compared to Mark's son, who's a digital native, right? The question for me is, what is a digital citizenship? We are all citizens. We all belong to a certain group, to a clan, to a city, to people. We have different languages. So how does that evolve? That would be one question. There's for sure a digital shift. And the other one is, still, and I think that should be the same like in the old days. Nowadays, it's healthy skepticism. There's always an option, there's new stuff to use, but staying skeptic a little bit. Don't just jump into the pool. It might not be deep enough and you will hit your head.
I like your positivity, how you started and say we are doing this anyway. You cannot change the culture. We are in an environment where we'll care for it. You just have to continue caring. I love this part of the answer. For me, I think what we have to change or do differently is I still think leadership management thinks the whole AI thing is an IT thing, and ethics should be a compliance issue. So let's move it to a compliance department and or HR department if there are some other rules there, and that will solve the problem. And as you heard before, I'm now the sad guy in this episode, the warning guy. I think no, not I think. I know it's a responsibility of the whole society. So we need models who are traceable. We need to know where data come from. We need to know what is fake or not. Is it generated by AI or not? So I'm deeply concerned seeing pictures that look like original pictures from the past, and now we are faking and changing history. And I think this is not continue as we are doing now. It's really being aware that it's a society issue, and we as a society have to do something, and it's not just the IT department or HR department or compliance department. So I think we need not a culture shift, but we need a shift in thinking. It's our all responsibility, and not the tech moguls that will take care for us. They will not at the moment, what I see.
I'm going to go a slightly different way, just for a change. Have either of you seen Mad Men?
In the streets everywhere, but there's a movie
No,
or
Mad Men. It was a TV series,
Nope.
and it was set in advertising in the world of the 60s, and fundamentally it told stories about the craziness of the world of the 60s through the lens of somebody in advertising. So of course this is still the days when cigarettes paid for an awful lot of advertising, so big tobacco was a part of the game. It was a world where women's place in the office was very different. And I watched it with my son 2 or 3 years ago now. And we sat there every episode, and I would sit going, like, I know the workplace has changed a lot since I was young, but it's startling to see how it was then. And he would look at it and go, Dad, is that actually possible? Like, is this real? Surely they've got to be inventing this because of the way they're treating different types of people. And you look at the way our workplace has changed in our lifetimes. I know when I started working, nobody got training about sexual harassment or bullying.
Mhm.
Talk about privacy and security and personal information. All the things that we have learned in our businesses are important to establish expectations for with people and to teach them about, because we needed to change our workplace, right? And a lot of those changes were really about changing our workplace to be more inclusive for everybody who was a part of it. And they took years, because I would periodically go, hey, the life of women in the corporate world is much better now than it used to be. And then I would coach women who would go, no, it's not. Despite years and years and years of mindfulness and training and awareness campaigns and all the rest of it. And I'm not going to suggest that AI agents being part of the workplace is anything like the issues we had with equality in the workplace. But I'm going to go, it's really disruptive, because now we're going to have a workplace that's got people, humans, and agents. And it's going to have a whole bunch of expectations raised about awareness, whether it's awareness of agents for ethics or awareness of people for the way in which ethical concerns arise in the world of AI. It's going to take years of real education, mindfulness, and clear action. Because I don't know how many times I've been through sexual harassment training to make sure that I'm aware of it. But every now and again, I'll see something in it while I'm doing it for the 20th time at a different company. And I'll go, oh, that's a really interesting scenario. I had never thought of that as potential bullying or harassment. Um, and it's actually awakening me to the possibility. And I think right now, for a lot of people, it's about just being awakened to the possibility.
But you said we needed years, and still the situation isn't better. Now we are much more faster. What can we do different this time?
Well, that's the really interesting question about it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there are worlds in which, the fundamental deal with AI is the more that you try and make your company AI powered, the more you organize your information. And as part of organizing your information, you find things that need to be codified. And whether that's coding standards or values or ethical principles, there's all kinds of things that need to be codified. Once you get them codified, you can get agents to scan for them. Right? I could, for example, have some kind of ethical behaviors, ethical interactions agent that scans the transcript of every meeting that's held on Teams, looking for potential ethical violations and raising red flags to go, it seems like we're seeing patterns of a particular type of ethical violation. So I can get AI to help me to monitor it and be aware of it and design action and response, if that happens to be something I choose. But of course, to choose that, I have to also look at the ethical dilemma of allowing an agent to scan every interaction that's had on Teams between people for analysis. Right? So you can develop a system that starts to develop a certain amount of self-monitoring and self-policing there. But then it even just raises the potential complexity even more, because what if your ethical self-monitoring agents start to monitor for the wrong type of behavior? Because if you're using Grok, there's a fair chance of it.
But doesn't it start with how you are brought up? Because if I look at my kids, if I look at my granddaughter, how do I exemplify what good behavior is so they can follow, they can learn? And yes, the future will be totally different after I'm gone, but it's about behavior of human beings. And does AI help? Yes, of course. Does it maybe enforce? Yes. Let's build it in. But the question will be, how do we create an environment, starting in a family, in partnerships, going through our workspaces, as you mentioned, Mark, where we are kind to each other, where we treat each other like equals, like human beings, because this is the behavior I would like to see. The degree of support by AI, it depends, right? Again, it depends on the context. It depends on the stakes we have. But just be kind and do the good job.
Great. I would like to close with much more open questions than I prepared. What can we do differently? How can this look concrete in practice? We still call it Unleashed, Agents Unleashed. How can successful AI accountability look like in practice? You said already some parts of it. I know.
Yeah, and look, I'd really stay with, if I boil it all back down, and it's like a broken record, mindfulness. Right? You've got to start having the conversations. And I think it's really important you start having the conversations in a way that does not scare people into not engaging. There's a world which is, there are some people who are excited about AI, some people are scared about AI, some people who are worried that it's going to take their job, some people are worried it's going to take over the world. There's all kinds of attitudes of people towards AI. Then there's people understanding how AI might help them in different types of jobs. But then there's also, what are the risks of AI? And I think there's a risk, and this was kind of, I don't know, I'll go there, right? For at least a year, the surface for AI in SAFE was responsible AI. Right? So the whole surface that SAFE had, and obviously they've changed a lot over the last 6 to 8 months, but for a good while, if you went AI in SAFE, all you saw was responsible AI, which is fundamentally how do we govern AI and ethical AI, right?
Right.
And it was missing the what's exciting about AI. You just read this long laundry list of, oh my goodness, these are all the corporate governance measures you're going to have to put in place before you can responsibly use this new thing. And that overwhelms and it drowns evolution. Where for me, I think just as for most organizations, you're entering a mindfulness journey to say, how can we apply AI in our organization in a meaningful way where we get return for our investment? I think we've got to have a parallel conversation that also says, well, how can we do that ethically? Right? What are the implications, and how are we starting to evolve and take on an organizational stance in terms of our belief about AI and ethics, and let it unfold?
Sounds like you're advocating becoming teenagers again, being responsible, but sometimes a little bit stretch the boundaries and then say sorry, and do it the next time better and learn and try. Sounds great. I had many bingos while listening to you. For me, it's really get people involved who are affected, like mindfulness you said before, and build in these correlations in the code that we can be sure, that we have ethics. Those who are affected and some kind of what Harm suggested in the beginning to use AI to enforce this ethics. Stephan, you have to add something. You said some things about this.
Yeah, just summarizing what we just discussed. People will redress with AI. How do we empower them? Organizations, corporations are responsible for what they build, how they deploy it, how it's used. So this accountability. The third level, where I'm a bit hesitant, is government. Governments, for me at the moment, worldwide, are not doing a good job when it comes to this item. We just had an election in Switzerland about an electronic ID. Almost 50% of the people are not yet convinced. But hey, now it's imposed. We have to do it. So how do we deal with that? And how do we make it really successful for human beings on all different levels?
Just one takeaways, my friends. Just one takeaway. Which one would it be? And wrapping up the episode.
I'll jump in. I'm going to steal from Mark Twain. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. So my question to you is, what do you know about AI and ethics?
Wow.
Yeah, and that's a strong one, Mark. So I'm still looking into the mirror. AI is reflecting the best and the worst of our own humanity, forcing us to decide which version of ourselves we want to become, we want to encode into the future.
Oh, that's so great. So mine now loses up. No, mine sounds like it's a responsibility of our society, of us as parents, us as neighbors, us as humans. So ethics is a socio-political responsibility. And with that, I give you to the hands of Mark, and he can wrap up and tell you what's next week. You want to mute somehow, Mark? On my side, at least.
I had to mute myself to cough, and now I'm back, and some post-production editing. Next week, I think will be the first of a few episodes where we're going to look at different roles and talk about, and I think for me, this is kind of inspiring because it's what I'm finding in a lot of my coaching conversations, is that beginning of saying to someone, how might AI be relevant to you and your job, right? What are the possible places you could use it? And, we kicked off season 3 with a look at AI and user stories and how AI might be disrupting user stories. We're going to go a bit broader next week, and we're going to talk about AI in the product management role. So looking forward to that one, and we will be in Stephan's capable hands. In the meantime, thank you for joining us, and hopefully you don't have too many ethical dilemmas between now and next week.